Welcome to the Greek New Testament.io podcast with hosts Dennis, Stephen, and Ian. We bring you in-depth grammatical discussions of the Greek New Testament from verse analysis to syntactical concepts to textual criticism. Our discussion is all based on our joint project to bring a Greek New Testament grammatical commentary to the church. If you have a love for God's Word and hunger for deeper understanding of the grammar of Koine Greek language, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome, viewers and listeners. Welcome to our Greek New Testament.io podcast. This is Ian, and I'm joined by Dennis and Stephen. Dennis, could you give us a quick introduction to what we're going to be talking about today?
We're going to be clearing up a confusion that quite often comes up. There are two different teas, and we want to know more about how to tell them apart.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dennis. So as a bit of background, podcast is based on a project we have to build out a grammatical commentary of the Greek New Testament, and that's based on an extensive database that Dennis has been building over a number of years. And from that database, we can gain a lot of insights, which you'll hear about today. And as always, we're going to start with a scripture reading from the Greek New Testament. Stephen?
I'm going to read both scriptures that you see on your screen. First one from Acts 17:20. Ξενίζοντα τινα εἰσφέρεις εις τας ἀκοάς ἡμῶν. Βουλόμεθα γνῶναι τινα θέλει ταῦτα εἶναι. Once again, using the modern Greek pronunciation. Ξενίζοντα τινα εἰσφέρεις εις τας ἀκοάς ἡμῶν. Βουλόμεθα γνῶναι τινα θέλει ταῦτα εἶναι. You are bringing some novelties for us to hear. We want to know what these are. The next scripture, Mark 2, verses 6 and 7. Ήσαν δε τινες των γραμματέων εκεί καθήμενοι και διαλογιζόμενοι εν τες καρδίας αυτών. Τι ούτως λαλεί, βλασφημεί. Τις δύναται αφιένα αμαρτίας ημίης ο Θεός. Once again. Ήσαν δε τινες των γραμματέων εκεί καθήμενοι και διαλογιζόμενοι εν τες καρδίας αυτών. Τι ούτως λαλεί, βλασφημεί. Τις δύναται αφιένα αμαρτίας ημίης ο Θεός. There were some scribes there eating and thinking in their hearts, why does he talk this way? Who can forgive sins but God?
All right, let's talk about this. There are two colors up at the top. There's interrogative tis with an acute accent and indefinite tis with a grave accent. So they have different accents, usually. If you look in the first verse, Acts 17:20, you'll see tina and tina. They're the same word, but one is interrogative. The blue one is interrogative, it means what, and the red one is indefinite, it means some novelties. What are these? Now, there aren't too many verses in the New Testament that have both of them in the same verse, but they're both quite frequent, over 50 times each. And in Mark, we see another pair there. The first one is red, that's some, and then the second two are both interrogative because there are two questions, why and what. And you can see all three blues have the acute accent, and both of the reds have no accent because that is an enclitic and it doesn't necessarily have an accent. We're going to look at a couple of other verses and read those. Pastor, would you be able to read that one too?
Surely. Let me read both verses from John. 1 John 13:28 through 29. Tuto tha udis egnon ton anakimenon pros ti ipen αυτό. Ti neskar edokun ekpi to glosokomon ichen iudas, oti legi apto o Isus, agorason on chrian achomen istine ortin, itis ptochis inatido. Once again, tuto tha udis egno ton anakimenon pros ti ipen apto, ti neskar edokun epito glosokomon ichen iudas, oti legi apto Isus, agorason on chrian achomen istine ortin, itis ptochis inatido. None of the party knew for what reason he spoke to them, for some thought that since Judas had the purse, Jesus told him to buy what was needed for the feast, or to give something to the poor. And then the other text, John 12:47a, kai andis mu akusi ton rimaton kemi phylaxi, ego ukrino afton. Once again, kai andis mu akusi ton rimaton kemi phylaxi, ego ukrino afton. But if someone hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him.
All right, again, we have the blue for the interrogative and the red for the indefinite tense. The interrogative is what, where, why, and the indefinite is usually some in it. So again, on the first blue T, you see the acute accent, which indicates usually that it's interrogative. On the first red tines, you will note several things. It's got an accent, but the accent is grave. So that makes you think that it's grave like the grave on the indefinite. But remember before, the words, the indefinite tense did not have any accents at all. So enclitic accents are variable. You see that the second red one is T and it has no accent on it. Sometimes what is the indefinite. We saw that on the previous page. But this time, what is black, and it's not the indefinite tense, it's the relative pronoun. So either the relative pronoun or the indefinite pronoun can mean what. And it's either a relative clause or an indefinite relative clause. And we have the same confusion in English. We're not really sure if what is a question or which might be a relative pronoun or it might be an interrogative pronoun. So Greek has the same confusion. Now dropping down to the line where John 12:24 is, this one does not have two different kinds. It only has the tense. But here's the confusing part that makes things tricky. You see the tense up on the top. It's a grave tense, and that's the lemma for the lexeme. That's the entry in the dictionary. But down at the bottom, it's red, and it's got an acute on it. Up at the top, the one with the acute is blue. So that's why sometimes it's tricky. And why is that? All right, if you look at ke, ean, tis, mu, you see three initial marker words in a row followed by mu, which is an enclitic. Tis is enclitic and mu is an enclitic. My
things
computer
moving pretty smoothly there, and you can see plenty of sunshine and warmth outside. Please stay safe, everybody. Hydrate, plenty of water, sunglasses, sunblock, and hats.
Okay, Stephen.
Translating the Mark II text, there were some scribes there eating and thinking in their hearts, why does he talk this way? Who can forgive sins but God?
All right, let's talk about this. There are two colors up at the top. There's interrogative tense with an acute accent and indefinite tense with a grave accent. So they have different accents, usually. If you look in the first verse, Acts 17:20, you'll see tina and tina. They're the same word, but one is interrogative. It means the blue one is interrogative, it means what, and the red one is indefinite, it means some novelties. What are these? Now, there aren't too many verses in the New Testament that have both of them in the same verse, but they're both quite frequent, over 50 times each. And in Mark, we see another pair there. The first one is red, that's some, and then the second two are both interrogative because there are two questions, why and what. And you can see all three blues have the acute accent, and all three and both of the reds have no accent because that is an enclitic, and it doesn't necessarily have an accent. We're going to look at a couple of other verses and read those. Pastor, would you be able to read that one too?
Surely. Let me read both verses from John. 1 John 13, 28 through 29. Ταῦτα ουδείς εγνῶν ton ἀνακειμένον προς τι είπεν αυτό. Τι νέσκαρ εδώκουν εκπί το γλωσσόκομον είχεν Ιούδας. Ότι λέγει αυτό ο Ιησούς αγόρασον ον χρειάν έχομεν εις την εορτήν ή της πτωχής εἰναι. Once again, ταῦτα ουδείς εγνῶ ton ἀνακειμένον προς τι είπεν αυτό. Τι νέσκαρ εδώκουν επί το γλωσσόκομον είχεν Ιούδας, ότι λέγει αυτό ο Ιησούς αγόρασον ον χρειάν έχομεν εις την εορτήν ή της πτωχής εἰναι. None of the party knew for what reason he spoke to them, for some thought that since Judas had the purse, Jesus told him to buy what was needed for the feast or to give something to the poor. And then the other text, John 12:47a, Kaiandis mu akusi ton rimaton kemi phylaxi, ego ukrino afton. Once again, Kaiandis mu akusi ton rimaton kemi phylaxi, ego ukrino afton. But if someone hears my words and does not keep them, I do not judge him.
All right, again, we have the blue for the interrogative and the red for the indefinite tense. The interrogative is what, where, why, and the indefinite is usually some in it. So again, on the first blue T, you see the acute accent, which indicates usually that it's interrogative. On the first red tines, you will note several things. It's got an accent, but the accent is grave. So that makes you think that it's grave like the grave on the indefinite. But remember before, the words, the indefinite tense did not have any accents at all. So enclitic accents are variable. You see that the second red one is T and it has no accent on it. Now, sometimes what is the indefinite. We saw that on the previous page. But this time, what is black. You see it's black, and it's not the indefinite tense, it's the relative pronoun. So either the relative pronoun or the indefinite pronoun can mean what. And it's either a relative clause or an indefinite relative clause. And we have the same confusion in English. We're not really sure if what is a question or if it's a which might be a relative pronoun or it might be an interrogative pronoun. So Greek has the same confusion. Now dropping down to the line where John 12:24 is, this one does not have two different kinds. It only has the tense. But here's the confusing part that makes things tricky. You see the tense up on the top, it's a grave tense, and that's the lemma for the lexeme. That's the entry in the dictionary. But down at the bottom, it's red, and it's got an acute on it. Up at the top, the one with the acute is blue. So that's why sometimes it's tricky. And why is that? All right, if you look at ke ean tis mu, you see three initial marker words in a row, followed by mu, which is an enclitic. Tis is enclitic and mu is an enclitic. So the tis has to get the acute accent even though it's the indefinite. So this is the kind of thing that you run into on the confusion. You can look at the translation and find out which one is which, but some people want to know how the accents work and they want to be able to read it without looking at the translation. So we're going to talk some more about the trickiness and the details and the peculiarities of these accents and where they're at. What this is a table of monosyllabic roots with genitive in os. This is third declension, and you can see is, pas are adjectives, and here and anir are nouns. But their roots are just single syllables, and then they have something that is very unusual among declensional words. Declensional words are anything with case, nouns, adjectives, pronouns, participles, and articles. Those generally are what's called retentive. They have the retentive accent, and that means if you look down at the very bottom, it says sperma, spermata, and spermaton. Now that's a normal retentive accent, but you see that the accent shifts. It shifts from, on the spermaton, it shifts from the first syllable to the second syllable, and that's because the initial omicron is so long that it drags the accent forward. But still, this follows the retentive rule.
Dennis, I believe there's a misprint on sperma and spermata. It looks like the smooth breather rather than the acute accent.
Thank you. That's true. That's a misprint. That should be an acute accent instead of a smooth breather. You see that that is the normal rule, and it's repeated thousands of times in the Greek New Testament. The monosyllabic third declensions violate that rule. If you look, is got the accent on syllable 1 in the dictionary form, but it shifts to a later to syllable 2 on the genitive. So all of these shift to syllable 2. And this is the universal pattern for all words that are monosyllabic third declension. They violate the retentive word. However, now we're going to go and see the exceptions. This is a table of the declension of the two tis. The first tis is the interrogative, and it does have the violation. You see how it's always on the first syllable and it never shifts over to the second syllable. So that's the only inflection that breaks the grave rule. That's the other exception. You see, normally if a word is in front of another word, it turns to grave. Tis is the only word that doesn't do that in the New Testament. The editors have chosen to violate their regular conventions so that they can distinguish it generally from the other tis. Now, if you look at the 3 columns of the non-retentive indefinite tis, you see there are 3 different ways to write that. The first column is acute. Those occur 6 times, 3 times, 0 times, 1, 5, 2 times. The second is unaccented. We saw that. And the third is grave. So all 3 of those can occur. The indefinite tis has 3 different ways of writing it. How can you tell on the 2 acutes? You see there are 2 columns on the acutes. Well, column 1 and column 2, if it's dissyllabic, if they're 2 syllables, the accent is both acute, but the accent is on a different syllable. So tinos is interrogative, but tinos is indefinite. So there's a way to tell all of them, but the 2 red ones are the same. You can see the blue tis and the red tis with the acutes are the same, and those are the confusion points. So even though the editors have made some attempt to distinguish them, they don't always distinguish them. Those are the ambiguous inflections. There's one other peculiarity on these accents. The only grave lexeme in the entire dictionary is tis. Of course, as I mentioned before, the indefinite dissyllabic inflection of tis break the retentive rule. So we're going to go on to look at some more. Let's discuss these accent peculiarities that we have seen above. The accents of the two tis are often informative. 5 of the 9 forms that you see above have 4 different accents, and 2 of the lexemes have the same declensional spelling per parsing aside from the accents. So they look identical except for the accents. The lemma of the declensional lexeme with case is the nominative singular. That's the one they choose to put in the dictionary. The retentive accent rule is that the other inflections try to retain the accent on the same syllable, and accents do not shift to a later syllable. We saw that the monosyllabic third declension violates that rule. But the exception to the exception is that tis interrogative does not violate that rule. We're going to talk about the 2 different tis. First, interrogative tis. Monosyllabic interrogative tis, t, are the only oxytone inflections in the Greek New Testament that retain the acute before another enclitic word exceptionally instead of changing to grav. Oxytone means on the last syllable. They only do this if they are interrogative. Now, you don't have to learn all these rules. This is just a good reference to go through and show you how complex these are and how the Greeks know all of this stuff. Even though tis is oxytone, its polysyllabic forms lose their oxytone status because they are retentive on the initial syllable, even though other monosyllabic third declension oxytones like is shift to the final syllable. The third declension accent of tis are unique in the Greek New Testament, even though they are simple. Okay, now we're going to go and talk about the interrogative. What's unusual about this one? The accents of the inflections of enclitic. This is enclitic. Enclitic means that it generally pushes its accent back to the previous word, but they're completely regular for enclitics. So this is the surprise. The monosyllabic grav form tis that you see in the dictionary never actually occurs, even though its form is in the dictionary. It's the only grav entry in the dictionary. Its dissyllabic inflections may be grav. But the reason that it does not appear with the tis itself is that no monosyllabic enclitic is ever grav. That's just a rule of the way a monosyllabic enclitics work, if they're monosyllabic enclitics. Now, it would have been more consistent in the dictionary to put the tis without the accent at all, because the other, like yeah or ta, their dictionary entries don't have a grav on it. But that's the way the editors chose to do it, and they thought they were helping people out. Maybe they were just making it more complicated, or maybe they were helping. All unaccented or grav tis are indefinite enclitic tis, but inflections of tis are occasionally acute, even though the dissyllabic inflection of tis of both kinds may be acute. They are still unambiguous. That is because you can tell which syllable it's on. Okay, this is just a refresher on the ambiguous tis and t. This is the only acute monosyllabic inflections, tis and t, are ambiguous. They can be either one. You have to look and see whether it's followed by a enclitic. This is a table of how they're used. They can be used, like all words, as nouns or adjectives or adverbs. All 3 of them can be used anyway, and then this is what they mean when they're used that way. If they're used as a substantival, they're who or what, and the indefinite is someone or something. As an adjective, it would be which, or indefinite is some, and then as an adverb, it would be why for the interrogative, and somehow, which is not very common. And this gives you the percentages of the times that they're used that way with that particular meaning. Interrogative tis is primarily singular, hardly ever plural, and the neuter, and it's usually neuter, indefinite tis is singular or plural, and it's normally masculine. Okay, we're going to talk about what kind of clauses they go into. Interrogative tis never occurs in a subordinator or relative clause. It occurs about 72% in main clauses, which must always have a question mark, and about 28% in interrogative relative clauses, like we saw what largely in indirect discourse. I'm asking you what. They are substantival and never have a question mark. So you can't always count on the question mark to tell you. The question mark will only be on main clauses. Matthew 10:11, exitacita tis en afti axios estin. Find out who in it is worthy. That's an example of a interrogative relative clause. Tis en afti axios estin is the object of find out. So unlike regular relative clauses, which are usually attributive, interrogative relative clauses are never attributive and almost always substantival. Interrogative tis usually comes first or early in the clause. Okay, now we're going to look at the clauses that indefinite goes into. Indefinite may occur in any type of clause. The four clause types are main clause, a subordinator clause, like one that starts with that, or a relative clause, or an interrogative relative clause that starts with an interrogative pronoun or word. Indefinite tis is the Greek indefinite article, a or some, if it's attributive. Some grammarians deny that Greek has an indefinite article, probably because it's much less common than in English. This is a question that Pastor asked. Do you want to say anything about this question, Pastor?
Just that I was having difficulty translating. I was reading that morning the Byzantine text and was having difficulty with it. So I looked at UBS 4 and it seemed a lot easier. I submitted the question and you did confirm that the critical text is easier.
This is a textual variant. You can see that in the UBS 4, it's just a simple tis. Who hopes for what he sees? But in the Byzantine, it's more complex. There's both the interrogative and the indefinite. The T, if you see a T like that, it's usually going to mean why, which is interrogative. But the other tis, the red tis, you can see has no accent. So you know right away it has to be indefinite. The usual translation for the nominative singular is someone. So you would say, for what anyone sees, why does he hope for it? These were the questions that you asked. What's the difference in meaning? Essentially, they are different in their translation, but they boil down to the same thing. The second question was, which one is harder? And obviously, the more complicated it is, the harder it is. And the third question was, if the Byzantine reading is correct, why does it give the object clause before the main clause? It's optional because the object clause is a direct object. The whole clause is the direct object. And unlike English, Greek has no order for the direct object. The direct object can come before or after. There are quite a few things that Greek has an order for, but not the direct object. This was just the answer. This is a good example of the two T's question. The Byzantine is lexio difficilior, the more difficult. So I've highlighted the red and the blue here so that you can see what's going on with the two, but I also put in the black what. You see how this has an interesting mixture. The Byzantine has an interesting mixture of the indefinite tis, the interrogative tis, and the relative pronoun. And the relative pronoun means what? You could have even used the interrogative pronoun there instead of the relative pronoun, but they wouldn't do that with two different T's with two different meanings. Both of them front the relative clause as the direct object, and that's common. It's about 50-50 whether it's going to go before or after. This is a comment about the two different variants. The Alexandrians were a bookmaking center of the world, and many of the editors like to improve the classics by making them more concise and pithy. They had a Reader's Digest version of Homer. And the thing to notice here when you're looking at the two T's is how easily they shift. If you see these 1, 2, 3, 4 words are the same in both versions, but the fourth word, the tis, looked the same in the manuscript, but the editors had to supply an acute on this one, and they didn't put any accent on this one because this one was followed by another T, which was interrogative. So this just goes to show you how closely the two T's are connected. They're almost interchangeable, but in any given context, there's only one choice.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome.
So we want to invite our viewers, that's you, to come visit our website at greeknewtestament.io, where you can find our past podcasts. And we also rolled out recently a new feature called Ask Dennis, where you can submit, and we invite you to submit your grammar, syntax questions to Dennis, and that can be on a particular verse or just a grammar question in general. But we have some past posts there you can look at, but you can also submit a question right there on our website, and we're also on Facebook as well. So thanks for listening and watching, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the GreekNewTestament.io podcast at www.greeknewtestament.io.